All right, hi everyone. Thank you again for coming to our March community call. We try to have these calls every month and to focus on a particular topic or an aspect of Webrecorder tools, and then answer your questions at the end. And also to, yeah, and just to allow everyone to kind of discuss a little bit at the end. Yeah, so kind of to start where sort of what is Webrecorder? Webrecorder is basically it's an open source project focused on building tools to allow users to capture and replay web archives, and to do that as high fidelity as possible, and really to allow you to essentially to allow anyone to create web archives and use them in whatever context makes the most sense for them. And so part of that is basically kind of what are the key tools for that. So for capture, we have several key tools. We have PyWB, we have Archipelago, and we have Browser Tricks Crawler. In general, there are also other tools in this field. There's, of course, there's also Heritrix, there's Archivate, there's Conifer, and then for replay, we also have PyWB, and then there are other services that do that as well, that provide replay. Conifer is using PyWB as well, and then there's, of course, Internet Archive's Wayback Machine and Archivate. And then for storage, so really want to talk about storage this time. And so thanks to Lorena for finding this really nice GIF. So currently Webrecorder does not provide storage, and that's sort of for a reason, because we want to support whatever storage infrastructures that you already have. And essentially we're kind of basically storage agnostic. So we want to support users storing web archives wherever they would like to. And so as part of our sign up, we had the survey. Thank you for everyone who answered the survey questions. And yeah, so we basically want to share what the options are. And so again, thanks everyone for taking the time to fill out the survey. And so thank you, Lorena, for putting together the results from the survey. And so this is kind of a, yeah, these are basically the results. We have from basically the as you could see, Internet Archive and organizational digital repository are sort of the main places that users currently store their archives. And this is from all of your responses. Conifer is also up there, as well as S3. And then we had a few other responses that, including Google Drive and other things. And so, yeah, we basically wanted to talk about kind of what the options are, as there are many options, and yeah, and basically kind of provide a few examples of how you can use all these options. And yeah, so these are the results for where users currently store web archives, and then where do you want to store web archives? We can actually see that the organizational digital repository is actually the biggest, the most common answer, which is great, because I think we also share that the goal of helping users store their archives in their institutional repository. And yeah, so we also have the "I need help, please" response, and we're definitely happy to talk about all the different options, and that's always good, good honest answer to have. Yeah, and so what we'll do now is kind of cover some of these options and how you can use Webrecorder tools to store and replay your web archives from from a few different places. And so we'll proceed. There's obviously a few questions that would make sense to answer, including sort of the budget, the expectations, and yeah, we can cover some of that too as well. Yeah, so kind of moving on from the results, and so the main next question that I always ask is, where do you store your other archives? So in a way, web archives aren't necessarily all that different from other types of archives that you may already be storing. And just because I really like this image, I use it again here. And basically the idea is that, if you're storing your other archives in the cloud, you should be able to store your web archives in the cloud. If you're storing them in your institutional repository, you should also be able to store your web archives there as well. And yeah, that's in a sense the reason that Webrecorder is doing things the way that we are, is we want to support people storing archives, web archives, along with their other archives, all in the same place. And so that's basically the idea, sort of, what if you could store your web archive data without requiring any specialized infrastructure or servers? So if you're already storing movies or video or PDFs or other types of documents without requiring any specialized infrastructure, then you should also be able to store your web archives in the same way. And to be able to do that, we basically have a browser-based viewer for web archives, and that's what Replayweb.page is. It's one of the key components of Webrecorder tools that we'll be working on over the next year, and it basically allows you to load web archives directly in the browser. And very briefly, and we can come back to this later, but basically the key file formats that we use with web archiving are WARC files, which only store the raw data, but we also have a new format called WACZ, which stands for Web Archive Collection Zipped, which packages the WARC files, indexes, and page lists, and basically puts it all together into one zip file. And that allows for really fast access to the metadata about a collection and each page, no matter the size of the file. And so you can have a really large archive, and the archive can be loaded very quickly as a WACZ file due to this property of these files. And so that allows us to essentially load web archives from anywhere very quickly. And so I'll just do a very quick demo of Replayweb.page. So sort of starting from the very basic, you can go to the Replayweb.page site. I already have a bunch of files loaded here, and I can, for example, go and load another file, and I could just select a WACZ file that's stored locally, and this file is then loaded directly in my browser. And so this is basically allows me to, so this is actually an archive of Facebook and Instagram that I created from a previous demo using the archive web page tool. And this is kind of the replay portion of this. So I'm loading it just in my browser. It's only visible to me. Yeah, so that's sort of the very simple way to load archives. We also have a desktop app that you can use if you want to not use the browser or want something more standalone. It's basically the same idea. I can open the desktop app and also load the archive that way. In a similar way, I could also load archives from any cloud storage, S3, DigitalOcean, other types of basically object storage that's in the cloud. Many services provide S3 compatible storage, so it's not just Amazon. And again, if I go to Replayweb.page, and in fact, I already have an example of, so all of these, so I can actually search my archives, and all of these are loaded from, so I'll go to this one, for example, and I'll actually, so since it's actually already loaded, I will, so what I can do is I can actually copy the URL, and I can, and that's actually the URL that is used to load the archive. So this is, if it wasn't already loaded, I could just enter this URL here, and it creates, basically loads the archive very quickly. So even if I do a full refresh, and this archive, for example, contains a bunch of YouTube videos, and you'll see that everything, the initial page is loading quite quickly because it's only loading the initial page, but I can, for example, click on each of the YouTube videos, and they'll all start playing. And yeah, that's basically a key property of this system, is that you can have a very large archive and everything is loaded on demand. And in this case, since I loaded this from cloud storage, I could actually share this URL, for example, and I can, for example, I can type, so I can put this URL in the search, or sorry, in the, let's see how I can do this. I could basically share this URL with everyone, and you'll be able to load it as well. So that's basically another way that you can use web archives with Replayweb.page. You could put them on a cloud, then you could make them accessible to others, and so that's kind of the two basic approaches that we have, and so another option is Google Drive, and we actually had, yeah, so basically with Google Drive sharing, you could have, for example, a colleague of yours create an archive, upload it to Google Drive, and then share it with the rest of the rest of your team, or the rest of your organization. And we actually have, I know, Emma, if you'd like, we could even demo that right now.
Yeah, and I saw that there is a question in the chat that I think this kind of answers. Valerie asked, is there a third option between private and public, so you can share part of your corpus with an internal team, or just publish part of a corpus and keep part of it private, notably for authors' rights? And so this is kind of what you might be able to do in that case, where if you download a WARC or a WACZ, it's just a file. You can put it in Google Drive, you can manage all the permissions in there, and then you can load from there to Replayweb.page. So do you want me to actually collect the Twitter feed, or just pull up the Google Drive where we saved it?
Yeah, maybe in the interest of time, just pull it up where we saved it.
Cool. Give me 1 second. So the Webrecorder team has basically made a shared Google Drive that we all work from. Let me share my screen. So yeah, I think like a lot of people, we have a shared Google Drive. We put stuff that's relevant to us. And one of the things are our shared WACZ files. So in here, yesterday we did a little collection of a Twitter feed, I believe from the Media Archive Preservation Graduate Group. So it lives in here, and Ilya is going to be able to, because he also has permissions, grab it and play it in the Replay webpage. Do you want me to stop sharing and you can grab it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can also share it. Yeah. In the interest of time, we won't show up actually uploading to Google Drive. I think you're probably all familiar with how that works. But basically,
Yeah.
so, and the reason that this works is that we actually have a Google Drive replay web page integration, which you could all install. So if I'll just bring that up. Oh,
I think the
so,
important thing is basically that like the general public can't access that, but me, Ilya,
right.
and Lorena all can.
Yes. And then if we were to share this publicly, then it basically uses the same permissions as anything else on Google Drive. So basically, I can just double click on this file, and I already have it loaded from before, and it basically just redirects back to Replayweb.page and loads the file that way. Yeah, and so that's Google Drive tends to be a little bit slower than, for example, S3 and DigitalOcean we found, but it does work, and it does allow kind of for you to use essentially existing permissions that already exist in Google Drive to share web archives the same way that you would share other documents and files. So I mean that's this is basically just another option for kind of putting your web archives the same place that you might place your other documents if you use Google Drive.
I think
yeah, and so basically,
sorry, I think we should also preface of saying the reason why we are showing and sharing Google Drive is because a lot of us have Gmail. A lot of us have access to a Google Drive. That's not to say that we can't embed it somewhere else. This is exactly what Ilya was saying, that we want to embed our web archives in other areas. We just started with Google Drive because that's the most accessible to us at the moment. So if there's someone had mentioned SharePoint, which is Microsoft. So we're looking into that. So if you have suggestions, recommendations, questions, let us know.
Yeah, and actually kind of that is a nice segue, kind of moving on from Google Drive is next part is really, and I'm really excited about this use case because I think that this sort of opens up really a lot of possibilities, and that is embedding Replayweb.page into other websites. Thus far, we've basically shown loading things in Replayweb.page itself, which is either using the desktop app or going to the Replayweb.page site. But I think a really nice property of Replayweb.page is that you could actually just embed the web archive directly into another site. And this is actually an example, thanks to Ed Summers from DocNow, of the embedding capabilities of Replayweb.page. And so here you actually see the replay embedded into this site. And so here is basically a kind of a description of this archive and how it was created. And here you can actually see the 3 pages that were archived, and it's sort of a frame that's added to the page. You can kind of click on, for example, all the 3 pages here, and you can essentially put it in context of essentially whatever you'd like, and put it into any other website. And all of this is loaded from a static file, from a static WACZ file, and that's basically the entire. Essentially, in order to get this whole web archive in here, all that's needed is a single HTML tag, and that's described here below. And essentially, if you look at the source, you'll be able to see that tag, and that's essentially kind of the core idea of putting web archives along and embedding them into existing archival systems. And so that's our first example. Thanks, Ed, for setting that up. I also want to mention another example of this, and this is thanks to WIT at the Fordham University Archives. And so this is a really nice archive that WIT was able to create using BrowserStrix crawler. And this is basically a crawl of a media wiki site. And this is also embedded into the Fordham digital collections system. I think, don't know exactly how all this is set up, and I think WIT can answer questions about it later. But basically, this is also using the same idea. It's basically the actual embed here is just using that single tag, and that provides a way to integrate web archives into this repository system. And you can actually see here that there's quite a lot of pages. You could actually, since this was created with BrowserStrix crawler, this is a kind of a full crawl of a site, and I can probably do a full text search here. So it's all, when you use BrowserStrix crawler, it automatically does text search as well. And so you could actually also do search. This is all kind of part of the WACZ file and part of that embed. So just by placing that one HTML tag into your site, you can get a whole web archive in there, essentially. So that's our next example. And finally, I want to show integration that I'm also really excited about with Archipelago, which is a new digital repository system being developed by the Metropolitan Library Council in New York. And basically, this is a fully fledged repository system. I don't know if Diego is here. You could say a few words about it, but we're in the process of adding full integration for web archives to Archipelago, and this is kind of an existing archive that I've uploaded. So it has support for uploading WARC and WACZ files and automatically placing them into the repository, and also the ability to add additional metadata to describe the archive. Yeah, I'm really excited about this integration, and we'll have more to say about this in the future. We'll probably have we're actually working on a workshop with Metro NYC about this whole workflow, and so we'll let you know when we have that ready. But the idea here is to basically to allow anyone who is using Archipelago to upload web archives. That could be done basically depending on where you place your archive. So for example, if you place it in let's say S3, you could have an S3 bucket that's public, that's available to everyone, and one that's private, that's only available to your organization. With Google Drive, similarly, you could share some of the corpus publicly and some of it not. So basically everything is organized into files. So the way that we're trying to present web archives is basically as files. So if you could think of making a file that's public and a file that's not, then you could do the same with the web archive, essentially. Yeah, so that's one way to think about it, I think, because we're breaking up a larger corpus into individual WACZ files that are then uploaded.
I saw Anissa's question in the chat about sort of displaying additional sort of metadata about the web archive when you're embedding the viewer or the player, and yeah, I thought that was an interesting question, and it made me wonder if I mean, maybe this is diving too far into the weeds, but it made me wonder if there's any ability to pass like a callback or some kind of function to the player component, so that as the player is changing and people are looking at different content, the context around the player could perhaps display additional metadata about the web content that's being viewed?
Yeah, I think that could make sense. I see. Yeah, I see what you mean. So basically, sending some sort of event to the page that's embedding it, saying the URL has changed. Here's the metadata for that page. Here's the title, the URL, and timestamp. Yeah, that's something that I'll add that to list of things that we could support. Yeah, and I think that definitely makes sense. Yeah, because then you could do, yeah, you could then display it however you want to outside of the iframe box, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I guess the alternative to that would be if there was a way to pass in an option to the player that would allow like additional metadata to show up. So that's but I guess you'd have to figure out the right way to do it. And
yeah, what sort of metadata? Yeah, just out of curiosity, kind of what kind of, because I think metadata and web archives, there's not really any kind of standard, unfortunately, for what that means really. So yeah, does anyone have it? Yeah, do you or anyone else have any particular requirements or interest regarding metadata, or sort of what sort of metadata would you like to have besides sort of the key URL, timestamp, title?
I think Anissa mentioned the timestamp, and I think that's probably the main one, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
those. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we have those three elements currently: the URL, timestamp, and title.
Yeah, I think that was all I thought really. It just seems like the key thing to contextualize the archive that we're displaying and say, this is the web at a moment before the moment that you're looking at this web page.
Okay.
From Lauren, thank you, Lauren. All the content for a web archive embedded on a page needs to be in one WARC file, from my understanding. If so, are there practical WARC size limitations there at any level?
So yes, that's a very good question. It doesn't have to be all in one WARC file. Currently, it has to be in one WACZ file, which is a zip file that can bundle a bunch of WARCs together. And so basically, I think the largest that I've tested so far, I believe, is about 17 gigabytes. But
Yeah.
I think that it can probably go much larger than that. And also, I just wanted to share very quickly. This is actually gets to my bonus slide, which I wanted to address. And so this is not something that's supported yet, but something that I would like to support is basically something like this, where you could have a collection that's defined by basically like a file path. So if you have my collection, and then you can have, for example, multiple WACZ files, and each WACZ file can contain multiple WARC files as well. And then basically, if you want to add to the collection, you just upload additional WACZ files. And then with that, there's really no limit, because you could just, for example, if it's on S3, you could essentially unlimited storage there, and you would just add new files, and then you would point it not at a single file, but at the collection. So that's kind of a goal for Replayweb.page to support in the future. Right now, it's just limited to a single WACZ file, but that's how we would address that, is basically to support basically directories as collections.
Yeah, the next question was about unzipping the WACZ. It says we use Preservica, which handles WARCs in a pretty rudimentary way so far. Rendering is patchy, for example. We have to use an unzipped version. So just want to check if you have any recommendations. My first thought is that WACZ is basically just a zip file, so you can unzip it and have access to the WARCs inside. So if you're using a software that you want to make a collection, so you create a WACZ using our browser extension or whatever, but you need to, for some reason, load them as WARCs, you would just unzip the WACZ file like a normal zip file, go to the archive folder, and you could access the WARCs directly from there.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that for now, that's probably the best, basically the best option. A better option would be for Preservica to support WACZ natively. And so that's something we could talk to them about, because that would make it easier potentially, and would probably work. Like, I'm pretty sure that would work much smoother than the current approach, but that would require us to talk to Preservica and see if they would be able to support that.
Is there any recommendation for a certain period of downloading and storing preserved web pages, for example, every month, or does it depend on the weight that has been obtained? I guess it really just depends on what you're archiving and how frequently it will change, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's not really a one answer to that. I think, yeah, it really depends on the content. I mean, if a particular page is fairly static, then it might not make sense to do it very frequently. But on the other hand, if it's something that's changing daily, then you may want to, yeah, it might make sense to try to capture that on a more regular basis. Right now, we don't yet have any kind of automated schedule capture, but we do have a BrowserTricks crawler that can be run automatically for essentially regular captures.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in since we have quite an array of people, how, if anyone has like battle stories of how they set up whatever they set up right now, if they're how they set up their storage. I know, like, when I try to configure a server, I'm always pulling my hair out, and eventually, you know, it gets settled. I'm just kind of wondering other people's experiences, how, you know, if they're at an organization, how did they talk with their IT, or if they're doing it DIY. Diego, hand emoji, yes.
Yay, hand emoji. Hi. So I kind of play both roles, kind of like the IT department, the support department, and the one struggling with this. In Archipelago, and I will speak like about our use case, we decided to like try to make the backend, the storage, very flexible and like swappable. And we had to actually make a decision. It's like, what is the real protocol that we want to like the server to talk versus what is the storage backend? So we chose an open source project that has become very popular in the last years, but we chose it when it was like unpopular and the ugly kid in the room. And it's like Minio, and Minio is like an S3 capable server that is like open source. It's named, I'm going to type it here, min.io. And Minio has like two very good capabilities. First, it talks natively S3, but you can actually use your file system. So if you have like a server, you have like a system locally, you can directly use that without having to pay external systems. But it can also act as a gateway. So without changing any configuration or your metadata or your storage settings inside your server, you can like easily swap to an Amazon S3 backend or to an Azure storage or any other storage that you want, even like local SaaS systems or whatever. So it was a struggle at the beginning, right? Like understanding the way it was working, and also the integration to make the WACZ ranges work, so we can actually read from the end and the beginning of the files. But once we got that, the flexibility that we got from an open source project that is very well maintained, that is written in a very fast code, is just amazing for us. So we are rolling with that. It's more like a love story than actually a struggle story, but yes, that's our thing.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Diego. Yeah, and if there are any configurations for Minio that you could share for others to use, and if that would be helpful, yeah, we could, perhaps others could deploy Minio on their own as well. Yeah, I'm also a big fan of Minio because basically what it does is it's kind of like S3, but your own local copy of it essentially. So any tool that works with S3 will work with a Minio server, and you could run it within your organization, within your own systems, basically, and still have the benefits of the S3 compatible APIs. And so for example, yeah, yeah, Replayweb.page should definitely work with Minio.
We have another question of from Perla. Should we buy a server to store web pages and Twitters about COVID in Mexico? Do you recommend that a server? Do we recommend some sort of server that has some special features? And I guess it kind of comes down to like, it depends. And I hate that answer.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, I think I would have to think about that because this is sort of recommending server hardware buying. I don't know if I have a recommendation right now, but we could definitely think about it and get back to you on that. I imagine you probably want something with SSD hard drives. I believe that, but yeah, I think we probably should think about that and get back to you.
But I think that's a really good question because
yeah,
it's, you know, you can't ask more specific questions if you don't know what to ask. So what, you know, one reads and what we talk about, we just talk about servers, but like, what does that mean? And so, you know, it comes down to like, is there a budget? How much space do you want? Like, it's kind of an apartment.
Yeah. And right, and it is important to, these are all important considerations if you want to store things locally and don't just want to put things in the cloud. And yeah, we can think about what our recommendations could be in this area.
What about a question from Samantha. What about integration with locks? So locks is lots of copies, keep stuff safe. We love acronyms in our archives world. So what about integration with locks?
So yeah, that's a great question as well. We have been in touch with Thib, who's the technical lead for locks. I know that they are, they're working on integrating. They are working on integrating, for example, some of the new replay systems, mostly with PyWB so far. I don't think that they've looked at Replayweb.page. I don't know exactly where they are in terms of providing access in this way. For example, I don't know if you would be able to use locks and just embed a web archive and have it loaded. I think it's more, as I understand it, it's a more kind of manual process where something has to be requested from locks and then it's retrieved and then made available. But we can look into that if there's interest. I think it's more used for sort of essentially kind of long-term preservation storage, not necessarily for access. Although I think that storage and or access and preservation should ideally be combined, especially for things like web archives, in order to actually know that what you have preserved is actually working. I think that it needs to be accessible in an ideal world. Of course, ideals aren't always possible, but yeah, we could definitely look into that. A question from Ed. Is there any talk about bundling web archive data with a player that could still as a standalone exhibit? I believe that may have been done in the past with the Webrecorder player, which has now been superseded by the Replayweb.page app, but it certainly would be possible. You could essentially deploy, essentially have a way that you can double click on Replayweb.page and have it open a particular archive. That functionality isn't there yet. Well, essentially it requires another click. So you open Replayweb.page and then you click on the particular archive. A change to that would be to just automatically launch a particular page. That would be easy to add if there's interest in that.
So we have like a very practical last question here.
Sure.
So in Archipelago, when you like ingest right now a WARC file, we're like post-processing and converting immediately into WACZ file, right? And we have also like the chance of like getting the JSON file that contains extra metadata and index that into Solr. But I'm thinking, you just mentioned that actually like a WACZ file is like a data package that has like can contain multiple WARC files. Would it be preferable that if you upload multiple WARC files, that we just like join them into a single WACZ? Or does it like feel better as like a way of like having per WARC file a single WACZ file instead of like interaction?
Right now, it would definitely be better to combine them into a single WACZ until we have the aggregate collection support. So yes, for now, would definitely be better to, yeah.
Although we are adding a feature to Browsertrix Crawler now that would allow you to combine all of the works into a single work.
Yes, so if you are using Browsertrix Crawler, we will also have a way to get just one WARC file. If you're uploading multiple works from other places, then it'd be better to just combine them into a single WACZ. And that also brings me to remind us that we will have, at some point, we'll have a longer presentation on the Archipelago integration, when we'll kind of go over the whole process and what that looks like.
Thank you. That replies to my question. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, and in the meantime, feel free to reach out over the forum or email us, or reach out on social media. So we're always happy to answer your questions.